was like. You saw it, yeah, there's an organization that came down from out of cities that felt used for the ability to collect the stuff.
Eu levo forward, that's it. I don't want to get that. And I forwarded to her. That's what here's like this. Oh, here's our guest. Let me see, representative, anywhere, all the materials you need. Great, nice work. That's fine. You're right there. This one. Don't check this on. For your. Excuse me. Okay, so. Since I got it clear up then. Yeah. And then now we. I can see my voice. I was the no, I got my.
This one?
It's there, so the other side. Oh, you. It's not for you. Yeah. Morning, everybody. It's 10 o'clock. We're going to get started. Well, yeah, 10 o'clock now. I'll start with the roll call.
Good morning, everyone. Roll call. Cameron County,
Cameron County
Hidalgo County RMA,
here.
Hidalgo County, present. City of Bronxville,
Here.
City of McAllen,
Present.
City of Edinburgh,
Here.
City of Harlingen,
Here.
City of Mission,
Here.
City of FAR, present. City of San Benito, here. Stark County. Texas Park District, they're online.
Here.
Dora? Yeah, she's here. Cameron County RMAs, Valley Metro, here. Brownsville Metro, here. McAllen Metro. Port of Brownsville. Port of Harlingen. Port of Isabel, San Benito Navigation District, and Cameron County Spaceport. Quorum.
Move on to open comment period. Do you have any public comments?
No, sir.
We have any members, so let's make comment. No? Okay, we'll move on to item number 4. Approval of minutes for May 8th, 2025. Okay. If not, we have a motion. Motion to accept minutes for please. We have a motion from the Hidalgo County RMA. Second from City Brownsville. All in favor? Aye. All against? Motion passed. Move on to number 5. Discussion and action to recommend approval of the Unified Planning Work Plan.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and committee members. We are representing this item for recommendation of approval of our 2026-2027 Unified Planning Work Program. This is our biennial statement of work and fiscal plan. I would also like to notate that we are currently under our 30-day open comment period, and it will be so until June 29th. This is a draft of our 2026-2027 UPWP. We are currently going to be hosting 2 in-person meetings, one here outside at the Valley Metro office and one in the Harlingen Public Library on the 25th of June. I also wanted to mention that we have received rankings for our special studies from our subcommittee members, and we hope to integrate these special studies into our draft and as well as into our final version, which will go to our policy board for approval in our June 25th meeting. I'm open to any questions or comments.
Sure, if I may. So the UPWP is the central work program for the NPO. What it does is that it identifies the tasks that are being done throughout the period. So this is a template that we utilize through text law. All the NPOs utilize it. Of course, the variance is in the task. There's 5 components to it. You have administration, you have short range. So I'm sorry, it's administration, it's data collection, short range planning, and then first we have the MTP, and then the final one is the special studies. And the special studies, what I like to point out is that one of the things that we need to do here is develop a freight plan. We're going to do something a little bit different in terms of the freight plan, is that we're actually listing in the special studies an activity for us to develop a mesoscopic model. So from a modeling perspective, what this does is that it allows us to model at a platoon level. So with the, normally when we talk about travel demand modeling or traffic modeling, is that we are looking from a very high end approach. So like when we do our NTP, utilize a travel demand, that's at the macro level, where it covers the entire range of the MPO. This model will utilize all the freight components that we have from a national perspective, all the way down to the local perspective. So in short, what this will allow us to do is do mesoscopic modeling and micro modeling at the port of entry level. So some examples of this is to examine how the primary and secondary inspections, whether it's to or from the port of entry, to understand that movement. The idea here with this mesoscopic model is that we could introduce any type of infrastructure to understand how freight moves, and then how we can keep freight on designated routes, right? So that would remove some, it would alleviate some things in terms of freight going through our streets, as an example. But more importantly, what it does is that it gives us an econometric component to demonstrate that this investment will yield X amount of multipliers for us. And then just to carry on with this is that because we are in public comment for the 30-day, what to do is ask the TAC to accept the ranking from the subcommittee with regard to the special studies. So going back a couple of months, we opened up the call for special studies. And so we can go back to the list right now, but one of the things I like to reiterate is that we are currently under the CAT 7 and the CAT 10 call for projects. All of these planning studies are eligible for the CAT 7. Okay, so I would highly recommend that if a project here was not recommended for funding through the PL funding, is that with the CAT 7, they are eligible. If there's any questions regarding to the call related to the planning studies.
So right now, sir, sorry, is it being recorded? Elijah County, Billy Lillies. The way they're ranked, what you're saying is anything, because right now, obviously, even just the first 4, you don't have enough, correct, of funding
Correct.
that's available in the UPWP. What was that amount that was available?
So when we announced the call, it was about $2 million.
Okay. So the others 5 through 11 or 13, or what is it? Sorry,
Give or take.
I think it's 13, right?
Yeah, they're 13.
It's, okay, it's 13.
Multiple that were 6s, multiple that were 11s, because we had an even number submit the scores.
Okay, so the others would then, you're saying, apply for, are eligible to apply for CAT 7 call that's out right now.
Yes, that's correct.
And on the procurement for these, the MPO is doing that
Yes,
for all the projects,
just the planning.
just the planning?
Yes. So and thank you for bringing that up. So I had asked for guidance from TechStock. And one of the questions we had asked is that if there is a sponsoring agency that is identified as the winner, if you will, of the PL funding, can that sponsoring agency accept the money and then move forward with procurement? So we asked from TechStock is now actually the MPO will be the lead in procuring the services for the contract. And currently, right now, we actually have a project that is pretty much through that process. Again, is that, we're gonna make sure that we just do that. So like, for example, whoever gets the award, we will work with them in developing the scope of work. And then in addition to that, we'll follow identifying the architect, project managers, and things of that nature, very similar to what we are doing with the CAT 7 project readiness requirements.
So talk right now, so are we gonna have to have everybody that didn't get funded apply for the CAT 7 funding, or these will automatically go over to the CAT 7 funding?
Right, so currently right now, there is no standing policy, right? Because we have a call for PL. So that's very exclusive, if you will. Now with the CAT 7, the eligibility is greater, right? So because we didn't tie that in for some mechanism, but the idea now is that as we start to develop, hopefully today you all make a recommendation for us to develop or make the recommendation to the policy board to accept everything that we've been working on, right? The test form, all those things. So ideally, we're gonna have a single call for projects. When you have a single call for projects, is to identify all these projects, whether they're infrastructure improvements or studies, into the development of the MTP. The MTP feeds the TIP, correct? And so the readiness report will tell us the milestones of that project. So once we do that, we have a standing list, if you will. Once we identify that list, then we will be able to identify those projects. So in the future, in the short range right now is that we are going to identify these studies. We're going to program them in the UPWP and then potentially in the TIP. As we understand that there is going to be some type of balance of reconciliation between the NPO and TechStop, we will come back to this group and of course the policy board to identify that there is a excess of money that is programmed, right? That we want to eliminate the carryover. So now the opportunity is to kind of reset how we do planning to make sure that as we identify the potential projects or the studies or the available funding that we do it on a yearly basis, right? One of the other things that we haven't talked about here, but we will, I believe next month, is the discussion of the draft 2026 UTP. So the opportunity for us to identify the eligibility of projects, whether again, they're infrastructure improvements or their studies, is to start programming them now in the development of
The bolded line between 3 and 4 indicates that's the limit. So
It's partial funding, I'm guessing, right? Right, so, okay,
right? And I guess let me just again, just reiterate the partial funding component. Okay. Is that I would encourage, right, that if your project is not in the top 3, is to go ahead and apply for the CAT study. Okay, the difference is the 20% match. Now, if your project, right, if you want to approach the MPO with partial funding, understand that if it's from a CAT 7 perspective, as we normally deal with, is that there's a local contribution, right? That's not the local share. It's an 80-20 plus local contribution. So again, is that with the partial funding, right? So let's say that there's a gap or an excess of money, is that we would have to come back and say there's X amount and say there's 100,000 available. So we in the MPO can't just say, oh, number 4 gets it type of approach. Right? But when we've done these calls, whether it's for the PL funding or the CAT 7, CAT 9, and CAT 10, we have never really discussed formally say when there's excess, what do we do? Normally, the amount that is available carries over, correct? Builds. So that's one thing that when we do the reconciliation with tech stock, we need to understand what money is moving from one year to the next. That means when we have a call for projects, we can program those available fundings with a project that can, if you will, slip in to absorb that money.
are there any procedures, sorry, are there any procedures for like that excess funding, right? That partial, we're calling it, it's excess. We need to take it in the context of the top 3, but if once you finalize scoping, and negotiating between, can there be procedures for allowances for, essentially funding one of the top 3 projects that may need another 25,000, 10,000 per.
Right. So thanks. Very good question. So one of the things, and what I, I'm trying to establish, right? It's that when you go and make the recommendation to the policy board with regard to project readiness and all that, it's that we're going to ask the policy board to allow us to set some milestones in terms of the delivery of the. Essentially, how it works is that you fill out all the paperwork, we get the draft. Once we get the draft, we will set up a date with the said agency, correct? We want to understand, certain things. That's really what it's at. So when we're talking about an infrastructure project, we need to understand what the contingency is. So I think that having that communication at the very beginning to understand what the estimate and what the potential overrun is. Because at the end of the day, y'all understand, because of COVID and other circumstances, when it comes to infrastructure projects, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I read that it goes up to 60%. Right? The way it stands right now is that once you execute that AFA with the state, you can't come back, correct? With overruns and things of that nature. So, I guess I'm advocating, if you will, for us to understand what the project is before we start to make the recommendation further down the line to understand what that estimate could be, right? Because I think I'd rather understand the scope of the project and then the dynamics and the complexity now rather than later when we're going down and we're bidding and then all of a sudden, we need to figure out how to do this. So we're trying to eliminate, if you will, at least from my perspective, the local contribution. So what I advocate is for us to have a greater component of understanding the project so that we have a clear 80-20 split. That I think going back, the ideal here is that for us to come back and make recommendations to the policy board on procedures, policies, whatever it is, and the what ifs.
Okay, Ramon Navarro, RC HC appropriate. As far as this contingency, or surplus funding, have we already taken into consideration? Okay, if the CAT 7 has a 20% match, we also need to consider the fact that have we absorbed the TxDOT's administrative and overhead, requirements and participation for administrating the project, or is that going to come to the FPO, or are those costs also being considered in that cost?
So part of the discussion here would be for us to set that up, right? I think that when we have a call for projects, we say this is X amount of money that's available. When we get the application from the sponsored agency, as far as I understand, we never talk about the direct or the indirect costs, right? But the idea now is for us to understand what is the expectation from the state. That way we can, if it's eligible, right, if it's an allowable cost, we can build that into the project estimate.
I guess piggybacking on what that's the city of Barnesville on Ramon's comment. So this will be locally led, right? CAT 7, the city will have to let it do the AFA, pay for the indirect cost. And then also as in this is planning, we will have to have a text that approval procurement plan.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, and thanks, yeah. And so this is nothing different, correct? It's that because it's still federal money, but again, the lead would be in the MPO. So we would have an agreement with the state as well, right? I mean, we have a local planning agreement with the state. And then so when we go out for procurement, we got to make sure that the MPO has met all the requirements. And of course, the COG, our fiscal agent, has met that requirement.
But that's on the top three. I'm saying like the rest of us that didn't mean it, and then we can apply to CAT 7.
CAT 7, yes, sir.
Right.
And so all rules apply.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So, Louis Valley, the city of Harlingen, just to confirm, CAT 7 application's not the one that's due next week, is the next part of the call, right? Is that correct? Or is the one
That's the one that's.
Yeah, exactly.
always been submitted? Okay, perfect. Okay.
So all of the, we can resubmit, we have. Right call. Yeah, right call.
Well, that's the thing. What happens if, Tom, again, if that was due next week and we don't take this to the board until the 28th?
Yeah.
Well, we're gonna be late. We won't be able to submit because what happens if the board does not accept this ranking?
Correct.
And then, so my other question on the ranking was, is this also included the BPAC ranking? Do you combine them to put them together?
No. So remember this, we formed a subcommittee and the subcommittee solely weighted this.
Okay, because I thought it was reviewed by the BPAC.
No, sir.
There's a committee amongst.
It won't be pushed the 18th. June 18th will stay as the would, and we'll try to include these.
Right. So I guess let me explain this, is that we follow a calendar that the state provides, right? And then we also have to go through public comment that we're doing right now. And so we want to make sure, again, that we hit those milestones from the state. Now, is it possible for us to submit this without the ranking? Of course, right? But then what's gonna happen is that we'll just have to come back later and amend the draft document. So if the policy board approves this at the end of the month, then we submit that to the state. Then, the state will do a final review and then at some point, we can amend but because like I described, is that what we're trying to do is hit all these milestones, and there's a lot of rotary wheels that are moving. And so we want to understand and open up the opportunity to identify things that have deadlines, if you will. And then absorb what we have to, recommend to the policy board and then come back and submit for, like in this case, a CAT 7.
So, just two questions. So one, on the CAT 7, the carryover, and since, excuse my ignorance, I'm trying to learn this, it's a lot. That is not new monies, or is it new monies? It's carryover monies that continue to. Number two, can you provide to Hidalgo County, at least in writing, I know I've been asked by dealing with the precincts and working with them. Or point me to the area of the procurement where if they should apply for these other, the CAT 7 funding, these application studies. Where it says, that it's the MPO that has to manage the project.
The health perspective.
Yes,
So I sent an email
okay,
to Hidalgo County,
okay,
and I copied, the chair and yourself.
okay.
And then I also sent an email, to the COG along with the FAR district.
Okay.
So that, homework, if you will, recommended as, from the county.
One more comment on the draft, you
Staff is recommending approval, recommendation for approval of the updated public participation plan. And we are open to any questions or comments.
Any questions, comments, and stuff?
Major changes from the previous public participation.
It's a 180. So this is a completely new document that is state of practice. And I think one of the things that we are introducing that was mentioned earlier is that we are introducing an abbreviated 7-day comment period. So again, with that, it's been my experience that sometimes money falls out of the sky. And so we would normally have to go through a 30-day public comment period, right, with regard to amending the MTP and respective tip. With the 7-day abbreviated period is that we would just have to follow this document within the 7 days to rush any type of requirement or recommendation from TAC to the policy board to meet those deadlines. And so this is a tool that when I was in El Paso, we implemented. And so it's been in effect for over 20 years.
Further question? If not, we have a motion. Motion to approve, Edmund. We have a motion to approve. Second. All in favor? Aye. All against? Motion passed. Move on to item number 7, discussion and action to recommend approval of the use of electronic project request form, project readiness report, project schedule, project financial summary, and sponsoring agency resolution.
Yeah, so this is a flow chart, describing how the MTP carryover CAT 7 call for projects with the category 10 call for projects is sort of going to be handled. So we're going to receive the submissions of applications. We're going to receive the application through the electronic project request form. This would be to include in the MTP and our TIP documents. Then it would go over to the TAC subcommittee to evaluate those applications. We would have a part A and a part B component. The part A would be based off the project eligibility to be included in the MTP and TIP, and then also their evaluation based on criteria like project readiness, regionally significance, congestion management, performance measures, safety, etc. And then we're going to have the part B, which is the project readiness report status, and that's continuous based off of the revision cycles that we have with the state. And then once that is evaluated, then it's going to go to TAC for approval of recommendation, and then it would go to policy to award the projects, basically.
Was this flow chart included in the agenda item? The packet?
Yes. Yes.
Again, the name of that is the calendar. There was a submittal on this form of financial backup of the local government. Can you clarify that? In what form?
Right. So here, the financial summary component is that if we are, when there's a submittal to the MPO, we understand that we will be receiving the resolution, right? And that's a resolution. There could also be language describing that financial summary. Right? So one of the things that we want to capitalize, of course, everybody that's within the city and the county ranks and how they do their budget, is that you all can use your capital improvement program, things of that nature, to identify that that's where the funding is coming from. Right? So we did want to understand that if the priority of set sponsoring agency is nominating a project, that there's a source of money that's coming. Right? So it could be CO, it could be whatever it is. The idea is for us to start, utilizing all the efforts at the local state. Also do is that it would give us the opportunity to also engage that said agency and they're bringing in a project. So if we get a nomination for existing project, then the idea is for us to go, if you will, across the jurisdictions to see if we want to encourage the subcommittee here or even the TAC to the policy board that there's a bigger need across the jurisdiction to do said project, right? So then if we have, like, for example, a Cat 7 call, then the idea is to prioritize a corridor if there is a need of something like this, right? And really the entire scope of all this, if you all recall when we first started, is that we want to start identifying projects that will that are national and regional significance, right? And by doing that is that the question I always get asked is when we're looking at priority, how much dedication or commitment has the MPO and the policy board put into this, right? So there is no project that I'm aware of that is national or regional significance that the MPO can fully fund on itself, right? So we call that skin in the game. But the idea here is for us to demonstrate that the local commitment along with the MPO, in this case TAC 7, is our dedication or investment to that commitment. So when we're asking for the financial summary, it's not only to understand that it's coming from, the local contribution, whatever it is, it's coming from a capital improvement program, things of that nature, but how we, the MPO, can now engage in assisting or even having a bigger project to meet the greater need of it.
Andre, I'm sitting at the, refresh my memory. For this call for projects for the Cat 7 for this forum, is it identified for which funding year that we're gonna do?
So normally, I don't remember, okay? And so for this current Cat 7 call, we are just asking for the sponsored agency to fill out the application, right? So that's all we're asking. But we understand for the call for project, it is fiscal year 26. And then when it comes to category 10, it's 28.
Well, it's carryover funding, so basically it's older allocation, so we have to obligate by a certain time, which is May 2026.
Or are we gonna have a chance to look at future Cat 7 funding so that we could already apply for that funding in that year? Or that's what I'm saying, the copper project is gonna be for this
Yes.
year's funding.
The eighth is, you have to get an eighth by what, 2026?
Yes.
When's the letting obligation? When you have to let that property?
The goal is 26.
26, so make, so you have to get an eighth by 10.
So basically, they gotta be a 100% project.
Right, so funds to be obligated by May 26, right?
That was my understanding. Yes.
Right. So it's-
The August deadline of this year will be setting the tone for how much financing or how much money is going to be readily available thereafter.
So that's why I think this is just my opinion, is that we need to already identify this for this carryover year and this year's funding. So if there's something that comes in a big grander and they want $50 million or $100 million and we don't have it that year, we're creating that same scenario. But we're overcommitted.
Right, so I just let me say this, it's been my observation, I'm just gonna be very blunt, that planning here has been non-demonstrated. Like, I don't understand why Texas and the FHWA have looked the other way. So when we adopt all these policies, procedures, and tools, is that we are programming and planning within the MTP. The way this area has done it is backwards. They identify the tip and then try to move things out. That's not how it works. Okay, that's why we have such a big carryover. But what we are doing here is that we are being very selective with fiscal year 26, because that's where we have the carryover. In July, we're going to come in and open the MTP call. Exactly what they have said earlier is that we are going to identify the entire funding forecast that the MPO has, right? So we, under federal law, we have to identify the 10-year plan. Well, the state has already done that for us, correct? By way of the UTP. So the Texas commissioners identify, approve, and then we get the money within the first 10 years. The first 4 years of that 10-year plan is the tip, right? And we call that construct authority. And then from year 5 to 10, that is develop authority, and then anything else that the UTP is planning authority. So now what we're doing is that we're correcting that culture that has led us to this Cat 7 carryover.
The 102 carryover is all Cat 7 or is Cat 7 Cat 10?
It's Cat 7. So at the last policy board, we provided the breakdown, and we can send that out again, but I believe it's about $102 million for the Cat 7 for fiscal year 26. And then Melanie, remind me for the Cat 10.
I think it's 1 point some, I mean, let me make sure.
I think it's vitally put it in.
2.6.
When we take this policy to let them know, we're trying to prevent any additional carryovers. That's why we're doing it this way.
And the obligation of fund for Cat 10 is on May 28th.
Yes.
Just a comment on the Cat 10, because the infrastructure bill expires in 26, and so there is talk that Cat 10 may be eliminated beyond 26.
Right.
So there may be a couple projects, but we don't know if we will.
Right. And that's
Yeah.
yes, and that's very valid, right? And so one of the things here is that I have seen it happen, right? Where there's either Cat 5 or Cat 7. And if there's a shortfall, the federal government can rescind the land. Right. One of the things that we're going to be reporting once we all make the recognition of the policy board adopts all these tools for us is that we're going to be reporting on projects post-construction. So once the project lets, we're going to monitor to make sure that the project isn't on the inactive list. Right. So for those that are not familiar with the inactive list, is that if you had an agreement with the state and there is inactivity, that gets reported. And TxDOT and the FHWA meet. And then after a certain time frame, in feds after a year can remove said funding. We use that money. You lose your project. But to ensure that we don't fall in those parameters is to have that constant communication with the sponsoring agency. Like, we just want to make sure that now that you have the money, that you're moving in that direction to execute the entire construction arena plans.
As far as the MPOs aware, is there any of the projects that are on this tip or the tip that are on this inactive list currently?
So I think we still need to communicate with TxDOT and the FHWA in terms of that, and then open that up to the entire group.
If I may, those projects would probably not be on the tip or MTP because they obligated already. But then they're inactive and they're not really working on the project. So that's when it comes to that standing, that status of inactive.
Then I know that there's some new board members on the policy. Good job to do the flow chart. This is what you need to do first. You're gonna put it to the NTP. It goes over to the STEM or then it goes over to, just something broad so they can understand why we do it that way. Because that's my most difficult thing to try and explain that. Especially now that we did a call for projects for Cat 7 and my what are we doing? What are we doing? I said, sir, I don't have any project ready. Well, why don't we have to be project ready? Try to explain that.
I think that's on the LG 101. It's on the website.
I think Dora had
I think-
Yeah. Dora has her hand up. She did put in the comments that just a reminder, CRP funds are not guaranteed beyond fiscal year 26. LGs with funds beyond fiscal year 26 need to have an alternate funding plan in case funds are not available. This is the latest update from TxDOT-PPP. Thanks.
Hello, good morning. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, thank you for reading that in the chat. I overheard conversations about projects being on the inactive list, and I just wanted to, I guess, maybe provide some clarification on that. So projects that make it on the FHWA quarterly inactive list are projects that have obligated funds. For example, a project that has an approved FPAA, but has failed to submit a billing within 4 months of that approved FPAA. I don't think we've received the latest inactive list yet. I think the one we have is maybe a month or two ago. But we did have a few projects on that inactive list that have led and have yet to be awarded or have failed to submit reimbursement requests. One thing I will share that has been kind of catching us by surprise in a way is that if there's lingering FPAs out there and projects are not awarded there is a risk that that FPA is rescinded, and that actually did happen with a couple of projects. I won't go into the details of which ones, but I did want to share that. So once you get an FPA, it is very, very important that you go through with the letting process and award those projects. Now, I understand recently we had a TASA project that led and unfortunately did not receive any bids. It is going to be very important for that local government to work with the district to have a plan to relet that project as soon as possible. We don't want to run that risk of that FPA being rescinded by FHWA. And at that point, we don't have any control. So I just want to share that with you all. We just get notified, hey, it's done. And there's nothing we could do at that point but go through the whole process of requesting that FPA. And these timelines for that can be anywhere from 3 to 4 weeks. That's what we were being told actually just yesterday in meeting with our TxDOT TPP. And then also, again, just going back to the carbon funds, it's going to be very important that you all have an alternative funding plan, because right now with the things at the federal level, they can change from one day to the next, and we don't know what that next infrastructure bill is going to look like. So just want to share those comments.
Thanks, Dora.
Any further discussion? Questions or comments from staff? If not, we have a motion. So we'll do that. County RMA. We have a motion from the Delaware County RMA. We have a second. And a second from Valley. All in favor? Aye. All against? Motion passed. Move on to item number 8, discussion and action to recommend the approval of a joint application with Cameron County for the rural roadways departure reduction project regarding US DOT fiscal year 25 state streets and roads for all roads funding opportunity. So that we at the county reached out to NTO. If anybody was they're partnering with anybody for a joint application for this upcoming deadline for the implementation grant around for the safeties for all. They were not. There were no approaching us, so we asked if they could submit jointly with us. We submitted a project. This will be our 4th time. What's that say here? I think it's the 4th time that we applied. But we intend to utilize the new plan, safety action plan, to apply for the safety plan. And with your and the policy board's approval, the FBO and right for apply with us. Questions, comments?
What category of funding is this one?
This is for the NOFO for Safe Streets for All, the implementation grant. We just completed a safety action plan. So basically, it can either be a planning grant or an implementation. But we need a planning grant before you can apply for implementation. So we already adopted the action plan, and now we're eligible to apply. Everybody in the area can apply for an implementation grant.
So Ben, did the county do their own, or you're talking about the NPO?
We actually done our own a couple of years ago, and so now with this new one, we're getting utilizing the brand new safety action plan.
We submitted, there was a deadline on June 1st or something, submit a pre-application to a USDOT when we submitted what we wanted to do. They told us that the NPO plan may not meet the criteria.
That's just like,
Right, so one of the things, right, that we found out, our communication with the city of Brownsville, is that the SSS 418 identified that disqualified. Okay? And what we understand is that the vendor that the MPO hired utilized those Waco model. Right, so what I'm saying is that they took but the work that they did in Waco and just simply, applied it down here to the valley. So the plan is nearly identical. It may have changed pictures, geography, things of that nature, right? And so we also understand that the Waco NPO has already received federal funding through the SS48. So there is obviously a discrepancy. And so we have been communicating, we're still waiting for that said communication. I forward my concerns, in terms of, communicating to Tech Stock and our FHW representative. And so the idea here, again, is that we want to, again, reiterate that some of these projects that may be submitted on the SS4A plan, that we have a backup, right? And so if you haven't, examined how I try to operate is to have these things. So as we move through the project, application or nomination is to reserve some type of funding capacity in the event that that project doesn't move forward, right? So we just talked about in the other item is that when we're dealing with Cat 10, just as an example, right? And we start to develop the TIP and the NTP, is that we want to ensure that there's some level of cushion to absorb the what ifs, right? That's why the reconciliation of text is very important. And then here again, it's great to program to absolute zero, right? But again, we also understand that when we start to implement these projects, things go awry. We need to make sure that, here we're really a whole new consensus of how we do transportation planning and programming. I think that the more we understand what the issues may be, right, like in this case, it's for it is to have that backup plan. So again, the whole point here is that, I think just like the city of Brownsville, I was also stunned to say the least. But yet, because we have not heard from the federal partner, is for us to have that contingency, right? Like in this case for Brownsville, that we're going to advocate and recommend for you all to apply for the Cat 7. And then we're going to work with the county if the policy board wants to go in that direction. But still, I need to understand why there's a discrepancy between the two plans that exist. One being Waco, which already has how long has it been intact? Do you know?
Waco's implementation grant. They had their implementation grant, I believe, in 2024 for fiscal year 2024, and then they had their action plan fiscal year 22, I think. Yeah.
Obviously,
What did they specifically say about that?
There's one specific section, I remember right now,
Six.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which is what?
It was specific to the projects, and then the time ranges, and so.
The
we
implementation
had
of the
these
project.
projects, like Brownsville, I think was looking at project number 3, and then it's supposed to be like the time range in which to implement them, like a priority time range. And so that is where that one component of time range is what we think is the issue, and again, I don't know.
I've communicated with Nayan from the TJKM team. He reiterates that it's eligible because of Waco's plan and Waco's implementation grant as well. And so he basically outlined where in the plan it shows those missing components. I've reached out to the SS4A team. I've reached out to the POC, our point of contact for the SS4A grant that we currently have because it's not fully closed out yet. And I'm just waiting on a response for them. So we could,
Yes. Have you gone through multiple NOFO?
yes.
The criteria has changed a little bit with each NOFO, with evaluation and all that stuff. So it may be something that when Waco originally applied, it made it eligible, but now that with the newest NOFO, it may change some of the criteria that wasn't applicable to Waco.
That could be the case, yeah. But I'm looking for a solution so we can try to address this as soon as possible so we can all.
So regardless, we have a county plan. We still want to do joint application with the MPO, so we're still interested in that. We have a backup plan in case the MPO safety action plan isn't, it gets approved, but regardless, we would still like to do joint application.
Along those lines, I just think, as I recall from being on the SS4A committee, that if it's not on the list, you really can't apply for an implementation grant. So I'm sorry, for a construction project. So I guess maybe as you're asking these questions, ask the question about this project. I know the plan references Cameron County's Vision Zero. This is for all implementation. They did their own implementation, not necessarily through the Fed, but they have an adopted one, right? So just making sure that if we need to amend or add something to our project list, but I hate for it to get down the line and with that say it's not on the RTD MPO, implementation, just so that whatever needs to be done to link them or align them, so that you don't get that question when they're done power. So it's very gesture.
If I
The
could,
contract is still open with the TK.
we closed it, but we we basically still have the grant agreement sort of open with like FHWA. So we're trying to fill out the closing documents.
I mean, either way, the new responsibilities, right? And we have the capacity to fill that gap, right? Because like one of the things when we looked into it is that the time component, right? That they're talking about, establishing. What that means to me is that we would have to reach out to all the agencies that are out there to identify said projects, right? And once you do that, I don't want to say that it's we got you, right? Because if you identified a corridor under the SS48, but they're asking is the implementation range, right? So are we going to do that from year 1, year 5, year 10, right? And again, I'm not discounting the SS48 plan, right? But we need to understand that dynamic. But at the same time, as we run through that exercise, if you will, we have the CAT 7, we have the CAT. So again, is that we're going to work with the federal partners to understand this, and then we'll come back and we'll lead into the TAC and with all support for everyone that arrives. But, I think one of the things here, I just like to thank the city of Brownsville for applying, caught it now rather than later.
And the joint projects have a financial plan attached to them.
They have an estimated cost to them, and I think that's where they got their 3 million or the amount that they were applying for.
The support plan we identified projects.
For each like city and county. I think it was just for the city of Brownsville, city of Harlingen, Cameron County, Hidalgo County, and Stark County. They identified.
But going back to what I said earlier about working with the sponsored agency, we the MPO can't say what's priority for that said agency, right? But if you have a project in the capital improvement program, if you have some type of documentation, that's what we're drawing, that priority. So if the exercise is for us to reach out back to all the members to say, what are your priorities? And more importantly, your time frames. So if we have a capital improvement program that we can say in reference to the plan there, this is where that time frame is coming from, right? Because it's counterintuitive to me that we identify the priorities and then now okay, well, when are you going to implement? Right? Well, that's the issue with top-down administration.
So this was the one that had that super high amendment number 1, right?
Is that right?
The 200% of the work.
Oh,
No,
it wasn't.
no, this was a grant that we received, and it was 250, and that was the amount that was for the contract.
Let me just clarify. Yes, it's. I'll support it. All right, correctly. Then the one that you're referencing has to deal with the current contract that we have with Alliance for the MTD development. Yeah.
John Ray had a comment.
It was this question about, but if you guys can go ahead.
Any further questions, comments, or so? Okay, you have a motion? Motion to approve, everybody? And motion from city member, you have a second? Second from city member, all in favor? Aye. Motion passed. Well, move on to item 9, presentation of active tourism transportation project.
Yes, we do have our representative, Ms. Eva Gaspi here for Happen Associates who conducted the active transportation and freight.
Oh, great. Good morning. How's everyone doing? Yeah, absolutely.
You want me to move it for you?
Yeah. Thank you very much. So my name is Ilda Capricioso and I work with HAF Associates. And last year we had the privilege and honor to be able to work with many of the communities here in Hidalgo County through the LRGVDC on the active transportation and active tourism plan. As you can see up on the screen, we had a project team that worked on the active transportation component, the transportation network, and the active tourism elements to the project itself. Just a quick project overview. I know some of you participated in that process, so thank you again for your participation in that. This project really, the goal of this project was to help identify and develop a regional network of bike and pedestrian infrastructure that would also draw from the tourism in and around Hidalgo County. Both to serve as obviously active transportation and mobility opportunities, but also to really help connect the various state parks and the various natural resources that are well revered here in Hidalgo County. So just to give you a little background about the project scope, we had about 6 phases throughout the project, which included review of existing conditions. We had a public engagement component, a very active steering committee. We evaluated some of that information to identify some needs and then develop strategies and recommendations through phase 4 and then an implementation agenda in phase 5. Our active transportation phase really was weaved throughout much of the phases, but did provide a separate independent chapter of the plan itself. So there are several different project outcomes that we were aiming to accomplish through this process, which was to identify those active transportation and active tourism system, identify some of those priorities that communities might have, as well as some key connections that would help anchor trails or bookmark elements of trails. Or trail segments, to develop an initial implementation program, both in the short and long term, provide some identification for potential future branding strategies, and then develop an action plan for the Hidalgo County region, and then recommendations for that partnership and moving forward once the plan was completed. So just to reiterate, the effort for this project really focused on both transportation and tourism and how to marry those two items together. And part of that initiative was also, as you all have sort of been talking about, things on a regional basis and things that are of regional significance, really to be able to help not just build those connections, but also align your investments, right? So you're more powerful in numbers in terms of being able to work together to develop projects. And then, of course, obviously providing that opportunity for increased access and partnerships throughout the entire region. So obviously the study area included all of Hidalgo County, the various cities, over 100 destinations, including parks and open space areas, the state parks, as well as the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Refuge, and then the 4 county precincts. And so just some information you all are probably already familiar with. You know, you have a very large population here in Hidalgo County, you know, nearing that million population number. Interestingly, you have a multitude of butterfly species here, over 300 various butterfly species that either migrate to this area or are here in this area, and already 192 miles of both on and off street trails within the region. So significant study area, really great anchors in terms of tourism throughout this area. Just a quick recap on the public engagement component. So as I mentioned, we had a steering committee that included representatives from the county, city representatives, some state and federal partners. We had philanthropic components as well on that steering committee, health and education components, and business and tourism. We hosted some stakeholder listening sessions, which were both virtual and in person, really to get an understanding of what communities were prioritizing. We talked to a couple developers just to understand how they're looking at, you know, as they build communities and homes and other things like that. We talked with the state and federal partners as well. And of course, the general public. We also had an online community survey. This project started, I think, right at the end of maybe one of the other MPO public outreach components that also had some trails. So we were building off of that information as well. Just a quick recap of some of the listening sessions and interviews here. You can see we also did speak with the UTRGV and various other organizations that had an interest in both trails and tourism here in the area. I won't run through all of these, but you can see had some really great conversations with those folks. So just overall, and this is probably no surprise to you as you all are taking advantage of the funding opportunities that are here at the state and federal level, but people really are enjoying the trails. 67% of the population that participated in the study were interested in walking, running, or for recreation and fitness, and are often doing that about 3 to 5 times a week. But there were also some things that they mentioned, in terms of safety and other areas that they, either destinations were too far, or maybe it takes too long for them, or they're just not, they don't feel safe along some of those. So those are some of the things that we had more discussions about either at the steering committee or through some of the recommendations. A couple other little tidbits on the engagement component. Some of the amenities that folks really wanted to be able to see, particularly at trailheads were, shade and restrooms. It's hot down here, it's sunny year round. People want that opportunity. I think they really do enjoy the trailheads where, you have the parking, you have the restrooms, they can sort of gather all their things and then take their route to enjoy that trail section. And then we also asked folks to rank the types of improvements that they feel are really important to them. And so safe intersections and crossings really landed up there at the top. Better street and trail lighting, see some solar lighting along some of the trails here in the region as well now. So some of those improvements have already taken place as we speak. We had several themes that floated, not just from the public engagement component, but also from the stakeholder. And really, this was obviously those safety concerns, really being able to have more trail connectivity. There was a strong desire by some of the members of the steering committee to really incorporate more of that public health integration and wellness, as well as, continuing that community engagement, ensuring that trails are not just recreational, but also transportation accessibility, opportunities for alternative modes of transportation. Funding and financial constraints, always a challenge for communities, and certainly that remains a key priority and a key theme that popped up through this process. And then really making sure that the trails are for everyone, being able to make sure that they're provided access to low-income populations or typically underrepresented populations within the region. Okay, so I'm going to just kind of run through the plan framework here just to give you a sense. I believe you have a copy of the link of the plan, but there are approximately 6 chapters in the plan, including an appendix. And essentially, each of the chapters really highlights the different components of the phasing process that we went through in the planning process. And so really identifying that overarching vision and really summarize some of that engagement, looking at the existing conditions. So this plan, really isn't a plan that starts from new ideas. This plan really builds off many of the existing plans in the region. So whether that was a plan that a community already has for their trails, or plans that the county may have for their trails, we really tried to build off of those and incorporate that into the larger trail network and system. We looked at identifying some trail segments and just some general active transportation frameworks that look at those typologies and look at the facility design and different opportunities, really also, again, utilizing some of the standards that you all have and have been using in some of your municipalities as well. And then we also looked at, again, the active tourism component, really trying to understand where those anchors are, where those opportunities for experience are along the trail, where are there some burgeoning opportunities for new types of trails as recreation and entertainment for the region. And then finally, in the last component is the implementation plan, which really looks at, what happens after the plan? What is that administration of this long-term vision? What does that program funding opportunity look like? And is there a short-term work plan that the region can begin to focus on moving forward? So I'm going to run through, I have several slides here, but I'm not going to run through all of them, but I just wanted to give you a sense of sort of the guiding principles that we heard from some of those key themes were really boiled down to these guiding principles on comprehensive connectivity, that safety and accessibility, that economic impact, sustainability and health, that tourism enhancement also linked to that economic impact, and then that community pride and engagement. I think one of the things that I was really impressed on when we would speak with stakeholders within the community is how proud the community is of all the natural resource opportunities, the nature centers, the parks, the trails that they already have existing on the ground, the usage that the community has. They were really proud of the effort that has already taken place over the last, 5 to 10 years here in the region. So this vision statement was established in order to guide the plan. And so essentially it identifies that the goal of the plan was really to identify a signature countywide trail network in Hidalgo County that provides communities and a safe and comfortable environment for walking and biking, other forms of active transportation, with the goal to link users to those key destinations across the county that foster a culture of active living and enhanced transportation throughout the Lower Rio Grande Valley. So some of the slides in here also just include some images from the report about the demographics and the data, really looking at sort of some of that mobility component to complement the active transportation component. Also just an evaluation of some of the tourism impacts. I mean, these are really fantastic numbers and probably continue to grow in terms of the sort of direct spending, the employment components that your tourism has here within the region. Also, we sort of have a number of maps throughout the plan that really just identify all the various destinations. And when we say 100 plus, that probably doesn't include every single one. There are so many various destinations throughout. And this doesn't even really include, what I would consider those entertainment and restaurant destinations that you see those, TikTok moments for nowadays and all these things that people are just, foodies going around doing all of this. But certainly all the cultural, historic, and park and nature components throughout the region. So as a part of the effort, we look at the existing network to really try to get an understanding of what's on the ground, where are there gaps as we move forward, looking to connect not just the communities, but also the various tourism or components of communities that have a tourism component or an entertainment or an economic impact. And so this is just a summary of sort of some of that information from the plan as well. Significant system, no less. So I want to jump to the trail segments component. And so this is really kind of the vision of the plan, is really identifying the type of criteria that we looked at in terms of identifying trail segments. There are 9 proposed trail segments that are proposed in the plan, and that includes over 170 miles of both on and off street. There's 278 for the entire network, but that includes those particular plans that communities already have, that the county may already have, or that TxDOT already has in terms of both on and off street components. So there were about 6 criteria that we looked at in terms of identifying whether there were trail segments that could be potentially prioritized in the region. And that included, what does it connect to? Does it connect to something significant? Could there be, or would there be, or is there currently community support for it? Is there a balanced access in terms of population to potentially access that trail link or segment, or does it help to connect to an additional trail link or segment? Tourism, what is that tourism component? And obviously, if there's a health and wellness component, does it access a park or other sort of park-related component? And then, are there any specific challenges, that particular area may face that would need to be considered in a future feasibility? So these are the segments that I've listed up here, and you can in the report itself, these are outlined with some detail in terms of where they go and sort of, how they're proposed or what they're proposed to connect or have some connections to them. And so I'm going to run through a few of these. This was sort of the exercise that the steering committee went through, was to sort of evaluate some of the connectivity. I'm sorry, this is a little hard to see up on here on the screen, but some of the criteria that was looked at for each of the segments, and whether or not they sort of ranked in a medium or high level in terms of connectivity, health and wellness. What were the challenges, whether it's crossing drainage or irrigation district or other items like that, or highway. And so steering committee sort of went through this process and looked at these and talked through some of the criteria that was looked at and evaluated. Okay, so for the active tourism component, I want to touch a little bit on some of the efforts that our consulting partner worked on tool design. So they really evaluated different components of the tourism and where there were some opportunities to frame more of integration of the tourism into the trail. So looking at the trail tourism, bike, water trails, obviously the wildlife and birding, the cultural and educational components. There was also some trends that they were seeing in other parts of the country were some of the sustainability, which is people sort of enjoy going through these wind farms, and there are significant areas in Hidalgo County that do have wind farms. So the opportunity to potentially utilize that in the future could be something that the communities in Hidalgo County look at. And then potentially following the hub towns model for tourism and trail tourism in your communities. And then finally, in our final chapter in terms of the short-term, the implementation and the short-term program, we wanted to make sure that any of the recommendations or the proposed trail components or the regional trail framework really aligned with local, state, and MPO plans. We wanted to make sure that it was also in alignment with any active tourism existing plans, that there was certainly some feedback from stakeholders and the community, and that it was complementary to improving economic health and transportation principles throughout the region, as well as increased safety, improved safety and access for the community. So these were the goals. These are, sort of coming down from those key themes that we mentioned before, those guiding principles, and then these goals. And each of the strategies and recommendations that are in the plan live under one of these 7 goals. So as I mentioned on the onset, one of the, there are 9 different trail proposed segments. And because this is a high level plan, there was no right of way review or anything like that for feasibility, if you will. So really the next step of this plan is to take those 9 projects and these 4 that I'm going to run through and figure out whether or not there's some opportunity for potential future feasibility, and really dive in to see, we know this is a gap in the trail network, and is there a way for us or for you all in the community to identify what would be the primary or the best route for implementing that component of the trail system. So, we have these sort of named, but ideally they really are just sort of numerically named in the plan. But one of the key areas that we talked a lot about through the planning process was trying to build this connection between the existing Precinct 1 trail at this park here, and then trying to get it to connect over to the state park. Really pretty continuous, seamless trail component. So like I mentioned, because this is the high level plan, we did some high level review of, obviously there's some private property through here. This is IBWC maybe, or an irrigation canal, right? So additional work needs to be done in order to determine whether or not that would be the correct route. But generally this direction in order to get to the state park seemed like a really feasible opportunity for future evaluation. We also observed that there were a lot of north and south connections in the McAllen area, and really being able to try and bridge some of those with some east and west connections, really filling in some of the gaps, particularly between Mission and McAllen. And so this particular segment really just looks at, if there's an opportunity to reevaluate or to do some feasibility to improve that connection east and west, that would certainly help to continue to build that continuous and uninterrupted trail that exists right now on Griffin and all the way into McAllen, and ultimately collecting to that hike and bike trail down in Mission, the Mission hike and bike trail, and the state park. And then the third segment that I wanted to highlight is really this area here in Edinburgh, primarily because of one of the things that we observed and we heard when we talked to the folks with UTRGV is that, with the students and, the transportation challenges that they have and parking and all of that, being able to have more mobility options for students and safety mobility options were going to be really important. The other component to that was some of the communities to the east over here really seeking an opportunity to get to the cities, whether it's for work or whether it's for entertainment or education, really starting to build that network so that it helps provide some of that connectivity between those smaller communities in Hidalgo County and the larger areas that have workforce needs and educational opportunities. And so again, also here you can observe, and as you probably know, north and west opportunities exist and are on the ground already, but really building that east and west network to help make sure those are connected. And then lastly, because our neighbors in Cameron County were working on their Kata Kata Trail and their active plan, we felt that it was also really important to highlight starting to build that connection towards your neighbors in Cameron County from the folks in Hidalgo. And so really identifying some of the opportunities along these smaller communities, Elsa, Ed Couch, and others to really help build off of their existing smaller trail system that they have, and then having that connection continue to move eastward towards the Kata Kata Trail in Cameron County. So one of the other components of the plan is an administrative recommendations about, how do we begin this process? Yes.
You have a few more.
Oh, okay. Yes, absolutely. Sorry, I have several slides in here, but I'll run through this very quickly. So there's a component in the plan that talks about the administration of the plan after its completion, and really it just highlights continuing the steering committee and having municipalities within Hidalgo County support the plan through resolutions, and to continue to talk about the plan through the LRGVDC and the MPO process. There are very specific recommendations in the implementation matrix that are identified in both short-term and long-term, also identifying that lead partner in terms of who would lead that particular recommendation effort. So that's it. That's a summary of that plan. Again, thank you very much for the opportunity, and for those of you who participated in it, really excited to see kind of the next steps of that plan. So, yes.
We'll move on. Thank you.
Yes.
Move on to the next presentation, category 7, project readiness report.
All right. So good morning, PAC members. This is an information item for the initial introduction of the project readiness report. Let's continue with this. Okay, sorry about that. So the project readiness report is a tool in the form of a spreadsheet that reflects the status of projects programmed with category 7 in the 4-year transportation improvement program. The PR identifies key milestones in the project development process that have to be completed by local government project sponsors to successfully obligate state and federal funds. To provide some background on the effort, in September of 23, the Texas Transportation Commission adopted the carryover rule in the Texas Administrative Code, or TAC rule, that is intended to address unspent federal transportation funds. It's linked here, but to summarize and to say simply, this is the rule that we've been talking about that says that if at the beginning of the fiscal year, an FPO has a carryover equal to more than 200% of the previous fiscal year's TAC 7 allocation, the department may decrease the amount of category 2 carryover by an amount equal to that difference, which, as we know, would be extremely detrimental to planned on-system projects that support very high traffic volumes. So in 2024, the MPO had several project readiness subcommittee meetings and also had many serious conversations with the TxDOT Finance Division to discuss utilization rates that are shared in the next couple slides. In early 2025, this committee recommended forming another subcommittee to focus on how to directly address this TAC rule. That subcommittee met from February through May and helped shape what I'm sharing today. And I welcome any members to chime in to convey the message accurately at any time. So, as many of you know, our region has the growing balance of unused federal funds. In this table, you'll see the RGD MPO was predicted to have the highest federal carryover rate in the state and is being very closely looked at, which stresses the significance of getting out an accurate project readiness report. Part of the issue of this carryover that we've come to find lies in the fiscal year that projects are programmed. So carryover in this table is the annual allocation of CAT 7 as specified in the 2025 UTP plus the amount that wasn't spent in previous years. I included this slide to show the level of attention that is being looked at a state level. The analysis here prepared by TxDOT in Austin used projections made earlier, and it showed that in 2024 our carryover rate was 276%, 278%, and in 2025 it went up to 316%. And so we can expect this percentage to be reevaluated once the federal transaction reports are made available. So now that the demonstration of need is clear, the purpose and our aim with this planning effort is to proactively identify project delivery risks and improve the timing of fund obligations. The goal of maintaining this report is to allow the TAC and Transportation Policy Board to make informed decisions on programming projects in the appropriate fiscal year. This will ultimately increase the federal fund utilization rate and reduce carryover. The project readiness report reflects project status or health of projects based on the state and federal project development process that y'all are very familiar with. It includes milestone tracking, project information, and flags for anything that might need attention. It's fed by a list of resources shared on slide 9 and also included in your packet. I wanted to note that this initiative, while new to our area, is being carried out successfully by many other large Texas FPOs. So the components, the report can be looked at as having two main parts. The project information components on the left describes the project as programmed in the CLIP and FTP. And then the list of milestones on the right is all the critical path items that get a project to letting or shovel ready. It looks at the number of right-of-way parcels required and environmental clearance, if environmental clearance is likely to cause delays and what stages it is in, and if railroad coordination is needed. So this is a visual of what the headers look like in the report. And this is the list of resources that are integrated in the report. This version has information based off the latest board-approved TIP and MTP, project status forms that are updated monthly, TxDOT Connect, monthly status meetings, AFAs, and back in April, responses from project sponsors. So this is the report also included in your packet. I encourage everyone to take a closer look at it and get familiar with not only your projects, but the entire list to support our analysis of trends and the potential for programming projects in the year they're actually projected to let. What I wanted to note is that it's not intended to replace current operations between project sponsors and TxDOT, but support it. The intention here is not to assign fault at which entity is responsible for the next critical path item, as that is the responsibility of the RPIC and project sponsors, but really to share a transparent snapshot of the status of projects. I noticed that the comment section on the far right was beginning to have a sort of dynamic, that sort of dynamic. So soon after the board agrees to use these tools, it will have project schedules that are linked to more easily track when progress is anticipated and when there's slippage of certain milestones that are not being met for on-time project delivery. The next steps moving forward is to receive feedback from you all on the policy board, and then solidify the set of standard operating procedures to have this report presented quarterly in line with the August and November revision cycles. Also the 20 to 50 MTP and eventually the 27 to 30 tip. And this report will continue to be updated on a monthly basis from monthly progress. And so here's a set of useful resources and links if anyone's interested. And so with that, we look forward to any feedback, and this concludes the presentation.
I would just say for the sake of taking this to the policy, you can get an outline for those standard operating procedures. Because I know we want to hit the ground running as quickly as we can. Having been on this committee, I have to applaud everybody's effort for providing feedback and for obviously calling attention to the carryover problem. It's a significant problem that we all have a hand in helping. So I guess just to remind everybody, this is even though it's been kicked around for a while, it's version 0.9. I think once it goes live with the policy board, there'll still be some shifting and get it to where it needs to get. But it's definitely as good a start as we're going to get. So take advantage of the opportunity.
Any further discussion? Thank you. The agency reports, next one.
Dora, can you hear us?
Hi, good morning. I was just waiting for y'all to put the report up on the screen.
Okay.
If not, that's fine. I can follow
It's
along
right
with
here.
my notes. Okay.
I have it on the screen already.
I don't see it, that's why.
Okay, let me share it with you. There it is.
Okay, thank you, Adriana. Again, good morning, TAC members. Dora Robles with the Texas Fire District. Just really briefly, we had 5 lettings, local lettings this past month of May, 2 roadway projects with Category 7 funds. And then, of course, our 3 TASA projects all met their respective ready-to-let dates. There is one project with the city of Bronxville that will have to be relet. Unfortunately, they didn't receive any bids, so we are working with them diligently to schedule a new letting date and relet. For the remainder of the projects, we do ask you to please continue working very closely with our project managers to get your bid analysis turned into us for our review, and that way we can move on, hopefully, and proceed to concur to award those projects. We do have in the month of August, I believe, our second CRP funded project scheduled to let Stanger Shared Use Path along with Stanger Bridge. And other than that, things are looking pretty good as far as our lettings. Unless anybody has any questions at this time, I'd be happy to answer.
Questions or comments? Thank you, Dora.
Yeah, thank you.
The MPO update.
One of the things that I just wanted to bring up a little bit, that a couple of weeks back, we have seen news that there was a pending 16 elements related to regulations. One of them has to deal with the functionality of national market. Essentially, the deregulation or the requirement of this is that when it comes from project selection perspective, is that we are not going to be examining a project based on how well it contributes to national needs. I just want to advise everybody because we read the information, but we haven't heard from the FHWA on that second. So, in other words, is that when safety leads, one of the conditions that they put in my mind, one of the requirements for the NPOs is to establish a process that identifies projects of national and international significance. So along with that, there's a lot of factors that came into play. And so we have to demonstrate as a project addressing these things, right? And so now with the new administration is that there are no longer requirements or anything. So here, when the project is going through the NPO, doesn't say we can't look at it from a national business perspective, but we just can't rank it from that perspective. We are just waiting for guidance from the FHWA. But I just wanted to make everybody aware of that. When we read the report, it was very pointed, and there's other regulatory things that apply to other agencies. But this was very specific to, I mean, again, it's one of the great things, right, about how the NPOs are set up is that the local bodies can still develop policy guidance, data practice to identify citizens. I would argue that if we're talking about, for example, interactive court entry. It, I mean, there's several pillars, right? And so the bottom line is that when we're looking at transportation projects, there's an economic component, right? Whether when we're planning it, we're constructing it, and then when it's on the ground, that economic development pillar is still there. And so again, for us, is that once we understand the guidance from the FHWA, that we're going to have a response to for policy to be adopted by the TAC through the policy board. And then from there, we should come back and see how we examine selection set problems. It's interesting, right? Because this rule has been in effect for many years. And again, it's one of the pillars for the NPO. It's no longer a thing.
Thank you, Rich. Any questions, comments? Now, we'll move on to Dermot. Our next meeting is at 10 a.m. on July 10th, 2025. If we have a motion. Speaker. Second, motion from Governor, second from Speaker. On favor? Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you.